The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the My Council Services webinar this morning. We promised a prompt 10 o'clock start, and here we are. Just to confirm that you're all in the right place, we have still got people joining, so I'm just taking a slightly slow run into the main content. I'll introduce myself first. I'm Bernie Simmons. I'm going to be facilitating most of the webinar this morning. I am ably assisted and supported by my colleague Rachel Clinton. You won't necessarily hear from Rachel this morning, but Rachel is in the background making sure that everything is running smoothly, and I'll explain my role and Rachel's role in the session this morning in a few minutes. A few FAQs, frequently asked questions that we often get around these events. We are recording the session. The reason for that is so that we can enable it to be shared with other people that couldn't make it this morning, and indeed you can share it with your colleagues internally if it's of interest to do that. So we are recording the session this morning. We will also be making a copy of the slides available, as we will any case studies that we reference, so they're all available for download from our site, and a PDF copy will be made available for you. If you see things this morning that you are interested in finding out more about, or you want other members of your organisation, your colleagues to get access to it, we can run private webinars and sessions for individual organisations. So don't hesitate to come back to Rachel or I to organise that if you want to do that. In terms of asking questions this morning, we run a service called GoToWebinar, and that actually allows us to mute all of the lines on the call. We do that just to ensure that we don't get too much background noise, and when you've got multiple people on a call, and we've got in excess of 20 people on the call this morning, it can get quite distracting and noisy if people have got their lines open. So we mute all the lines automatically. That doesn't stop you asking questions, however. If you want to ask questions, and this is where Rachel comes to the fore, if you can use the chat facility on GoToMeeting, so there's a chat capability on the console for GoToMeeting that you'll be able to access, and direct your questions to Rachel. She will do her best to field and answer those questions this morning, and if we can't answer them during the session via the chat facility, then we will hold them and we'll follow up with you directly, and Rachel will let you know what the status of your question is. So to ask questions, please direct them via the chat facility to Rachel. We should be running for about an hour this morning, maybe a little bit faster than that. We may be a minute or two over depending on how things go, but we should have you on your way to get on with the rest of your Thursday by about 11 o'clock this morning, so we'll stick as best we can to the allotted time. In terms of agenda, I'm just going to talk briefly about some of the background to the current challenges in local government, and there are numerous challenges that are worthy of mention, I think, that are pretty much universal in terms of current operating environment. We'll then move through a quick introduction and background to My Council Services, talk briefly about some of the other local authorities that are using the platform. We work as a company, my company Abacus Limited, we work exclusively with local authorities. We've got our entire business with that through local authorities since 2007 when we set the business up. Then we'll spend the majority of the time actually giving you a live demonstration of what the kind of customer self-service digital platform looks like. And I talked about questions and answers. We'll do that throughout. Rachel will help with that, and we'll do that via the chat facility. So that's the structure for the morning, or for the next hour, I should say. So let's get on to the main activity of the day and start to kind of get involved in the main content. If you think about some of the primary challenges to public service delivery, and particularly for local authorities, I think it's fair to say that local authorities have been right at the bleeding edge of the current last couple of administrations' austerity agenda and need for kind of fiscal prudence and fiscal tightness, if you will. So you've got a bunch of challenges around shrinking budgets and the need to demonstrate cash savings. Alongside that, and as part of the same agenda, local authorities are being asked to demonstrate and deliver savings in resources. That's both divestiture of assets and often having to do the same services and often more services with less people. So there's almost a perfect storm going on. And then on the flip side of that, from the customer's perspective, you've got customers with expectations around service quality and service delivery that are really kind of pretty level, regardless of whether they're talking to or thinking about a public service delivery or a private sector delivery. So if a customer is transacting through their local authority, they'll have similar expectations of service and quality as they would if they were ordering their shopping from Sainsbury's or Tesco's or Waitrose or wherever else it might be, or ordering services and goods from any other commercial provider. So we're increasingly all being measured with the same yardstick when it comes to both quality of service but also accessibility of service, which brings me on to the final couple of points around the advent and dawn of unmediated channels, not to mention just e-forms and digital processes, but things like social media and so on. So local authorities and public service organisations in general have been having to think quite hard about how they deliver those savings and meet those fiscal and budgetary challenges, and also how you make sure you're delivering a contemporary service to contemporary customers with contemporary expectations. So there's no shortage of challenges, is the message, I think. In terms of the traditional local authority model, and this is not a marketing statement or a propaganda statement from our perspective, this is very much what we've observed in the marketplace. Is historically, local authorities have tended to organise themselves in a pretty kind of, I suppose, sort of siloed fashion. So if you're delivering street scene or broader environmental services, perhaps in regulatory services within that, then you'll typically have a fairly effective silo of your own frontline service function, your own administration function, and often one or a number of line of business applications to help you run the back office processes. The same has been true in social care, in revs and bends, if you're talking about unitary or shire level authorities, the same in highways or any other service directorate in the local authority. Often slotted in alongside that somewhere is a customer services function that doesn't necessarily cover the entire service stack. That's been the history, or the position historically, we would say. Challenges with that are that it tends to lead to fragmentation of process, data, and certainly IT systems, and overall drives a high cost of ownership. There are benefits of that model, which I think is why it's evolved that way in different times and in prior decades, because you do tend to develop pretty deep process expertise, which is quite important, because lots of the services, and let's not forget this, that local authorities deliver are actually quite technical in nature, and not only are they quite technical in nature, they're often quite complex, and they're also things that people depend on heavily for the quality of their environment locally, their community locally, and also sometimes for their individual quality of life if you start to think about social care and so on. And all of these things are being stretched because of the challenges we've talked about. And I think that combination of challenges has also put pressure on the viability of this more siloed organisational model. What we've seen emerge as a result of these changes is a kind of more contemporary operating model, and I wouldn't suggest that this is a binary outcome, that you're either siloed or you're completely non-siloed and linked up. It's probably an evolutionary process, and most authorities in the UK are on somewhere on that continuum, either more or less further down the line, as it were. But what we're seeing is the emergence of a central and pan-organisational customer services function. That does not necessarily mean that all of those customer service agents and customer services folks are housed in a single call centre in a single building somewhere. They may well be distributed and be working remotely from different locations, or potentially working from home on flexible shift patterns, all these sorts of things. But we've definitely seen the emergence of a centralised and enterprise admin and customer services function. Sitting behind that and alongside that are the technical skills and specialisms that allow the specific service areas to operate as they have historically. So that's delivery of environmental services, social care, if it's a unitary authority, children's services and highways and so on. So you've still got those service-specific specialisms, and they must be there to deliver service effectively, but they tend to be in a slightly reinvented form, and probably somewhat streamlined in terms of size, number of people employed in them and so on. From an IT perspective then, sitting behind those two crucial organisational layers is IT, that are enabling everything from a technology perspective, or at least challenging enabling everything from an IT perspective. And what IT are struggling with, we see, is the ability or the need to consolidate the number of systems and the need to join up data architecture so you can get a better sense of what's going on, and crucially within all of that, to try and save money. So the upsides and downsides of that shift from the more traditional siloed model to the more contemporary streamlined operating model, it's a pretty radical departure from an organisational standpoint from the historical kind of cost-saving approach, which has tended to be, we need to save 5 or 8% in a given service area. What senior leadership teams in local authorities are being asked to do now is much more of the order of, we've got to save 10 or 15% cumulatively year on year over the next 3 to 5 years. So they're really significant and deep savings that have to be made, and as a response, local authority leadership has changed its behaviour and said we need to not just think about savings in individual areas, we need to think about the way that we operate across the board in a more joined up, potentially a multi-agency context, and think seriously about how we streamline our processes and make them more efficient, and at the same time make them more accessible and maintain quality of service. So not an easy or trivial task. And I think the other thing I would say as a technology or as a representative of a technology organisation that works with local authorities is actually the entire answer does not lie in technology. Technology is certainly an enabler, but it is not the only aspect. There's a much more kind of broader organisational piece that needs to be considered, and that's why we share this background. What that background also enables me to do as part of the session this morning is to introduce what it is that we provide. So I'll just build up the screen on the slide on the screen now, and then I'll talk you through it. So, well, what we've built up there is a representation of the current organisational structure that we've just been talking about, and alongside that we've overlaid the various modular components that we offer as part of our end-to-end digital platform that we position as My Council Services. So at the top of that stack we've got a customer self-service piece, which effectively enables customers to pitch up to your .gov.uk web property or any other affiliated web property that you might want to enable transactions or interactions through, and self-service using an e-form. They can do that from a tablet, from a smartphone, from a PC. They can do it via a browser-based e-form. They can do it via a native mobile application, and they can have a synchronized view of the world, because the other facility that we offer as part of the customer self-service suite is the ability to create a My Account capability, so that I can log in and I can see all of the things that I'm doing with the customer. So I can do individual transactions, or I can log in as a customer and I can see everything that I'm doing with the authority as an identified resident of the borough or district or whatever it might be. And it's at this area that we're going to spend most of our time today looking at the customer self-service piece, and we will also spend some time looking at the next two sections, which are the back office screens that would be used internally for CRM, customer relationship management, and service management through our service desk interface. We also then offer a range of what we call line of business modules or systems that really enable the configuration of different types of digital process. So that might be a bookings and payments process, or it might be a contract or licensing based process. So we can open up different areas of configuration functionality that allow the council to configure different sorts of processes, and I'll talk more and share examples of those as we move through this morning. We also then offer a whole range of integration and automation components, and I'll just mention briefly MDM. In this context we're talking about master data management as MDM, so the ability to get perhaps a single view of the customer, and I'll reference that as we move through this morning, but the ability to play nicely with those other systems that you're inevitably going to be using in your local authority to enable particular back office functions perhaps. So we offer an integration component, and then we offer a whole suite of functionality that sits around what we call mobile working. So the ability perhaps that if someone raises, let's say a pothole request via their smartphone using an app in the morning, how do you get that out to an operative on their device, on their smartphone or their tablet device as quickly as possible and in an automated way as possible, in order that that council operative or commission service provider can pick that task up and deal with it and resolve it. So that's what we talk about as mobile working. There are other definitions of mobile working, but in the context of this, we're talking about the automated workflow, so that a completely remote worker can continue to work effectively whilst they're out in the field, both online and offline. We're actually running I will be running with Rachel a separate session this afternoon at 1 o'clock that goes into much more detail around mobile worker. We'll touch on it today, but we've got a separate session this afternoon. If any of you would, having seen the session this morning, would like to pay a return visit and see that session this afternoon, you'd be very welcome. So with the mobile worker piece, that also brings us back to remind ourselves that let's not forget that we've probably got a customer at the centre of most of the transactions, in fact almost always, and it's important to keep that customer updated. So if the customer has submitted that service request in the morning and it's been assigned out, you might want to let that customer know at each change of process or status of that particular service request until it's resolved, and you could do that proactively, or they could log into their My Account portal and see what's going on with it. There's lots of ways of keeping customers up to date. The other opportunity for cost savings, as well as self-service and concepts like mobile working, is the ability to enable automation through the process. and we offer a comprehensive and quite sophisticated set of configurable rules capability and process automation capability to effectively build automated digital workflow, so that if something meets certain criteria, it can be automatically dealt with in a certain way. And we'll talk about examples of that as we move through over the next 40 minutes or so. So that's a bit of an overview in terms of the modules that we offer. As I said, this morning we'll be focusing on the kind of custom digital access piece, service desk and CRM piece, and a little bit around some of the line of business capabilities. And we'll also show an example of integration into payment gateways, for example, so that you can do pay for transactions as part of the platform. That would be one example. And this afternoon's sessions, if you're interested in coming along, will be more focused on mobile worker. So what I want to do over the next couple of minutes is just explode out some of those functional modules so you get a better sense of what's available within each. So if we just kind of build a couple of those slides out, and I can expand on them over the next few minutes. So I've talked about the ability to offer customer self-service capability in an omni-channel context, so across multiple different channels, smartphone, tablet, PC browser-based interactions, app-based interactions, mediated telephone interactions, whatever it might be. And we can offer that as both a single transaction interface, as an individual form, and we can offer it as a My Account interface. The My Account interface has various levels to it, so we offer a standard Express My Account, which I'll be showing you this morning, and we also offer a My Account Enterprise capability, which enables the delivery of things like single sign-on. So that's sign-on with maybe your Twitter and or Facebook ID if you want to do that, and or sign on to multiple systems from a single authentication process. We offer, as part of the My Account Enterprise option, what we call an ESB, an Enterprise Service Bus, which is really a platform for enabling self-orchestrated integrations into third-party applications. So the ability to an extent from a council's perspective to self-serve on the integration piece, so keep cost of ownership down there. And then I mentioned earlier this master data management MDM approach, modules such as data custodian and data cross-reference, XREF, enable the master data management piece. So that sits as part of the My Account Enterprise. So you can build on the deployment of My Council services incrementally. You might start at quite a simple tactical level and slowly build up into a much more kind of enterprise implementation of our technology, if that's the way you want to do things. We talked about the CRM and service desk piece. That gives you really a kind of either a customer-focused view of the world through CRM or a service-focused view of the world through Service Desk. The best way to demonstrate those is actually through a live demonstration, which I'll be doing in a few minutes. I talked briefly about some of the line of business modules that we offer. So we offer something for domestic and commercial waste management. I'll be showing you that this morning. We offer something around contracts and license management. We offer a set of configuration capability around what we call risk management. That's really around regulatory services, so scheduled inspections for purposes of health and safety or food safety, and that's our risk management module. If you want to enable bookings and appointment bookings, both resources and meeting schedules, we can offer that both for internal and external. So an example there might be the ability for a customer to pitch up to your web property to identify themselves by logging in and then to book for a bulky item collection, or to book a municipally run five-a-side pitch, or to make a reservation on a spin class at a leisure centre that the council might run, those sorts of capabilities. Or alternatively, internally, book a meeting room, book an appointment with a benefits advisor, all those sorts of things. All of these line of business modules are overlaid with communications capability. So if you're using our waste module to surface and notify customers around their refuse collection cycles, you may configure that alongside the communications module to send them a text message the night before to remind them to put their recycle bin out or their garden waste bin or whatever it might be. So communication sits as part of that. I talked briefly about integration options. I think the only thing I'll say at this point is to say that the platform is very open in that regard. We've done lots of integrations with lots of third-party applications using generally web services and other approaches, but we can pull and push data into and out of different systems to make sure that you've got a synchronized view of data across the organization. And I mentioned mobile worker. I won't say too much more about this at this stage, other than we're running a separate session this afternoon if you're planning to come along to that. I've just popped up on screen a selection of some of our customers that are currently using the platform. I'm not going to read those back to you, but in black bold is the name of the council, and suffixed in red is the modules from our suite that those customers are using. Again, we'll be making these slides available for you, so you don't need to scribble those notes down. You can just download the slides once the event is finished, or probably later today or early tomorrow that they'll be available. So hopefully that gives you a bit of a background in terms of what My Council Services can offer. What I plan to do at this stage then is to dip into a bit more of a demonstration, an interactive demonstration, so you can get a sense for really what the platform is capable of doing. To do that, I'm going to duck out of my slides. I'm going to get rid of my scribbles that I've put on screen, and I'm going to do a couple of things at this point. I'm going to pull up a browser-based interface first off, and I'm just going to log into that. So what I'm doing is I'm actually arriving at an identification authentication screen, and I'm actually going to log in as a customer, as a pretend customer, as part of this kind of demo environment. And once I'm logged in, I get access to a My Account portal interface, fully responsive, so I can resize it. I can view it on a large screen device or on a small screen device. So there's no limitations to me in that regard. The other thing I'm going to do alongside that is I'm just going to share with you my iPhone screen. I'll just bring that up on screen. So what you're seeing there is my iPhone screen. And if I drop into the Council Apps directory, you can see there's a whole range of examples of different branded mobile applications that we've delivered to some of our customers. In the bottom right-hand corner of that directory is the generic My Council Services app, which is tethered to this demo environment I'm going to use this morning to provide you with a bit of a walkthrough. And if I open that app up, what I actually get is a view that is synchronized to the view that you see on the right-hand side, so the browser-based view, the responsive browser-based view, but it's actually being delivered as a native mobile application. And these two views are synchronized, so you're seeing effectively the same thing. The only difference is on one side of the screen, on the browser-based side of the screen, I'm actually logged in as a customer. So if I click on user details here, I see that I'm logged in as a chap called Mr. Gary Wilcox, so he's my made-up customer for this morning. Gary's a pretend resident of Redbridge Borough Council, resident at 78 Grove Hill, and so on. So he's a registered customer. On the left-hand side of the screen, as I look at it, I'm actually logged in here as a council operative. So I'm logged in under my own ID, Bernie Simmons, and I'm actually an operative of Redbridge Borough Council. So I'm what you might describe as a trusted user. And because of that, I get to see some slightly different things. So I get to see things like mobile manager, mobile worker, lone worker, express worker. So the first point of order, I suppose, in these two interfaces is to say that a customer can use either. Gary could use the browser in the morning whilst at home on his PC or on his larger screen tablet device, and he might then use the app later on when he's out and about. But also that what the user can see is based on what we call role-based access control. So as a different type of user with a different profile, I can see different things perhaps for a standard residential customer, residential user. So that would apply to resident versus council officer, but it might also apply to resident as an individual property dweller and user of council services versus a business user of council services. So you might have different profiles as a customer as well. The key being, if I drop into something like Report It on the right-hand side, a whole bunch of different Report It processes pop up for me. If I do the same on the app side, all of the same forms are made available to me. So they're exactly the same form design sitting behind, but rendered in either a native mobile application context or in a browser context. And I can use the browser or the app form from a mobile device. So I can choose which channel in an omni-channel environment I want to use. So first off, what I'm going to do is I'm going to concentrate on the right-hand side of the screen, which is the browser-based interface. So I'll just enlarge that a little bit. And I'll just jump back to the home screen again. And what we'll do in doing that is just kind of show you through a few examples. So if I go into the Report It example here, and perhaps I want to do something very simple, like report a flight tip, for example, I might click on the flight tip form. I get dropped into the form at that environment. This would be fully branded and embedded into the council's own web property, so you wouldn't be seeing it in this format. It would be an integral part of a web page on your gov.uk property. And we might then go ahead and answer the questions. We get a breadcrumb trail across the top that helps Gary as a customer know whether he's on page 2 of a 20-page form and page 2 of a 5-page form. As an aside, I might say that you might think carefully before deploying a digital form that's 20 pages long, and that isn't necessarily the best use of a digital form for a customer, but that's a different conversation. So let's go ahead and complete this process. So is the fly tip blocking a road or pathway? We'll say yes that it is. In that case, we're asking, is it causing a health and safety issue? And this is just an example form. You can deploy and design forms in any way. There's full form design capability on the platform, graphical user interface form design capability, so anyone can be trained to use that. We'll say I had to step into the road to pass by, for example. Is it on public or private property? We'll say that it's on public property. You could actually, as a first step, capture the location and tell the customer whether it's on public or private property, because the platform carries on it the full National Land and Property Gazetteer that we can synchronise to your own local land and property gazetteer, so that we can actually figure out whether something automatically, whether a location is owned publicly or whether it's on private land, which is obviously relevant for a process like a fly tip. Did we see who committed to fly tip? We'll say no, that we didn't. Please describe what's been dumped. We'll say general rubbish and furniture. So we then click on next onto the next page. We get the opportunity to upload a file, a picture, or some evidence in this case. So I'm going to choose something that's suitable. So we'll take a classic example. We'll upload that. We could upload multiple files. You can control how many files are uploaded, what the maximum individual size or the maximum collective size is. You can control what file extensions are loaded up. So all of those are configuration steps with designing the form. We'll click on next. This is a place-based service. So we need to know where on the planet it is. You'll notice that while I've been describing what's on screen, it's just recentered to where I am today. So it will automatically pick up where I'm connecting to the internet. But if I want to position it somewhere else, let's go back to Gary's community, which is at E18 2HZ up in northeast London. What it's then doing is it's pinging that address, in this case a postcode, or it could be partial address, against the local land and property gazetteer. So it's looking for the right location against an address in this example. So we'll collect an address, we'll give it an instant date, so we'll say it's today. We'll give it a priority, so we'll give it low priority. You don't have to ask these questions, this is just a set of examples. We're now at step 4 of 5, so we click on next, and then we can see a summary of all of those details that we've captured as a customer. I could save and submit later, as I could have done through any stage throughout the process. I'll then click on submit, and that will then submit that service request to Redbridge Borough Council in that example, because that's who it belongs to given the location of it, and the platform can figure that piece out. So that's one example. Having completed that process, if I then click as a registered and logged in customer on my reports, I can actually see that example there. So I can see that the fly tip at 60 Grove Hill on the 9th of Feb at 10:28 that Gary's created. I can get a list view, a map view, and a chart view of all of that. So I've got some of my own customer management information if I'm interested in viewing that. So that's one example of a fairly low complexity but relatively high volume type process that your authorities are probably currently dealing with. If we take a slightly different approach and we go back into that report it option, and this time I select on, instead of reporting a fly tip, what I want to do this time is to book and pay for a bulky item collection. So this is a slightly more complex, but again probably commonly used process within your own authorities. So the form presents itself in a slightly different way. Again, I should stress this is just an example form that actually I've designed, so you can blame me for any form design components that you don't like. But it's an example of how you might manifest this type of process. So given that I'm logged in as a known customer, I can just choose to say, well, it's actually for me at my home address, and that then picks up my registration details and dynamically pre-populates the form so that I haven't got to spend time doing that. If I wanted to do it on behalf of an elderly relative, for example, or my elderly neighbour who wasn't confident in using an e-form, I could also do that, and again use the property address search functionality that we demonstrated in the prior example to search for a different address. But let's, for the time being, go ahead and do one for me at my home address. It's then asking me to select available slots for collection. So we'll go and so we want a collection today. We want it to be for our domestic collection service, and we'll click on go and see what slots are available. Well, let's try a date further out. It looks like all of the slots today are booked, so we'll click on something for the 11th of Feb, so there are slots available on the 11th. I could have just clicked on Get Next Available Slot, and that would have taken me to the next available slot. So I want a domestic collection service at 11:30. What is it that I want collected? Well, let's say I've got some fridge or other white goods that need to be collected. Would I like someone to come into the property to remove those items? I'm going to say no, I don't need that because I've already taken them out. So we'll select those slots. You'll also notice this is a paid-for service, and it's gradually totaling up the cost of the service for me. So we'll click on select of those slots. That then confirms that's 11th of Feb, 11 till 11:30 is the collection window. All of the collection schedules and the number of slots per hour and the frequency of slots, that's all fully configurable by you, the council. You can change that at any given point in time, how many slots you allow per section and so on. We'll click on next. That then gives us the opportunity to upload a picture if we wanted to do that, so we may choose to do that if we're feeling conscientious. So let's see if I've got something suitable that I can load up here. There we go, some pictures of some unloved white goods. So we'll upload that photograph. Click on next. We know where the location is, so we don't need to capture the location off the customer. What we do need to do is a paid-for service, so the customer needs to pay for it. So this is an example of integration at this point, and because the customer is going to have to surrender some cash to pay for the service. So what the process is doing at this stage is doing a secure handshake with a payment gateway capability. So we're not, My Council Services is not handling the transaction. It's actually your existing payment gateway that we would integrate into. So that might be Capita or it might be Civica. In this example, we're doing Barclaycard as a test example. We click on the card type that we want to pay with. We then have to put in some details. So I've got some test card details that I can drop in here. So I'll put Gary's name in. We'll paste in a test card number, put in the expiration date of the card. So this is a familiar process if you've ever bought anything online. Put a verification code in, and then we click on confirm that we'd like to go ahead with that payment. The payment gateway, the PCI compliant payment gateway capability, will then process that transaction. It will hand a confirmation back to My Council Services, and we then surface that confirmation and the payment acceptance back to the customer. The customer then gets a final chance to review everything that they've created in terms of their bulky item collection, and they can then submit that, and that then goes to the council, payment completed, transaction completed. And again, from Gary's point of view, from our customer's point of view, if he drops back into his My Reports, he now sees both that he's done a fly tip this morning at 10:28, or he's reported one, I should say, not committed one, and that he's completed a request for a bulky item and he's paid for that at 10:33. And he can drop back into the details of those requests at any given point in time. So if you've got processes that are ongoing in the background, say who it's been assigned to or the status has changed, then the customer can go back in and see those details at any given point in time. This entire portal, so the interface that we're looking at here, can be configured in any way that you want. You can add tiles, you can remove tiles, you can plug it into existing web content, you can allow a single sign-on through it. All of these sorts of things are possible. So there's a couple of processes that we've done so far. We've reported and submitted a fly tip, and we've also created a request and made a payment for a bulky item collection on the 11th of February. So we've done a couple of things as a customer this morning. There's one other example that I'd like to share with you, which is just under the Pay For It tile. So if I click on Pay For It, I've got a single process in that section, which is check and pay for your council tax, or check balance and pay your council tax balance. So if I click on that process, there's a couple of things going on. So it's dropping me into a specific form, and actually what it's doing, it knows it's Gary. Gary's an authenticated registered customer in this example. We've got a pretty short process, but the first thing that this form is telling us is telling Gary what his current outstanding council tax balance is. So actually in this example, just in the interest of full disclosure, what we're doing here is just referencing a dynamic field within our own My Council Services database. In a real-life example, what you'd actually be doing is calling against a record in your Revs and Bens system, or a database that was an extract of a reflection of what's in your Revs and Bens system. So that's returning a figure back to Gary as an authenticated and identified customer that says, Gary, your council tax balance is based on information as of the 9th of February, so it's up to date, and his current outstanding council tax balance is £227. With an outstanding balance, if Gary wants to, he can go ahead and he can clear that balance. So he can use, again, the payment integration that's been created by the council to say, well, if you've got a balance of £227 and it's due, you might want to go and pay that. So we do exactly the same process as we did with the bulky item book and pay. It links into the payment gateway capability. It picked up the dynamic value for the outstanding balance at £227, so that's the value for this transaction. We click on the card type, we put in the cardholder's name, we put in the test card details that we want to show, we put in the expiry date, all of the requisite information, click on confirm that payment, and away we go. So 3 examples there that hopefully start to breathe a bit of life into the way that you can configure pretty much any type of process from a council perspective to be made self-service, from very straightforward high volume processes like fly tips to arguably slightly more complex, sophisticated processes like paying your council tax and checking your council tax balance, or booking and paying for a service. There are other processes that are available. I'm sorry folks, my line is just ringing, so I'm going to mute that if I can. Sorry about that, folks. So what we'll do is we'll click on next and complete that process. Sorry about the unscheduled interruption of my desk phone. We'll submit that, and that's the council tax piece taken care of. There are other examples in here. We've got some apply for it examples, so there's a whole bunch of things in here, so we won't spend too long on this, but if I want to and I'm eligible for a blue car badge application, I can go through a whole bunch of eligibility checks and we can run that kind of process. So there's all sorts of processes that are available to you as a council that you can deploy for your customers. Hopefully that gives you a good sense of exactly what's going on. So we'll go out and we'll just cancel that particular report, because what I want to do is I want to show you another couple of aspects of the platform that kind of get into some of the back office processes and so on. So to do that, I'm going to leave Gary behind for the moment, and we're going to move away from the customer self-service interface as the My Account portal, and I'm going to put up a different browser interface, and I'm going to log into that back office. So what I'm logging into here is the My Council Services back office functionality. So I'm logging in as a council officer. So the interface that you're about to see is not something that you would necessarily deploy to, well, it's not something you would deploy to a customer to use. It's something that your colleagues, yourselves, might use as a back office interface. So we'll log into that. And that drops us into the first screen that we see based on my user profile is the service desk screen. So the service desk screen is really a service-oriented view of the world. So if we were working in environmental services, or we were working in social care, or we were working in Revs and Bens, if you were using Service Desk, you'd see all of the things that you had the privileges and the authorization to see in terms of process type and data type from a service perspective. So we're seeing all of the service requests that are coming through the platform, and I can drop back into the detail of any of those. So if you see that, you'll see quite reassuringly that those 2 processes that we've created under Gary's profile, if you look at the customer column here, you can see they're both created under Gary's profile. We've got the fly tip at 10:28 and the book and payment for the bulky item collection at 10:33. So if I drop into one of those, for example, we can see all of the detail around that particular service request. So I can see when it was created, its current status, I can see all of the form data that was submitted as part of that process. I can see the customer that submitted it, in this case Gary. I can see any evidence that was uploaded as a picture in this example, or it might have been a document, a PDF document, or a JPEG, whatever it might be. I can see the location with a view of the map, and I can see who owns it. So this is an interesting case in point, because what we're starting to see here, and I won't go too far down this avenue because this is more for this afternoon session, we've had an automated rule kick in here which has said we're actually automatically going to assign a fly tip service request to a particular mobile worker. So that's assigned it back out to me. So that's happened in an automated way, and also alongside that it's created a work order, so a particular task that's been assigned out to a different worker, in this case a mobile worker profile. So we're starting to see the glimpses of mobile working capability on the platform. I'm deliberately going to stop that kind of that line of inquiry there, because that's more for this afternoon session. If I scroll down, then what I get to see is actually the full audit history of the service request thus far. So we can see at the bottom of that audit history, the historical trail of everything that's been done to it, is that the service request was submitted by a customer under the following profile at 10:28 this morning. We know that was Gary. Its initial status was time-stamped. Then the first thing that the system did automatically was to send an email back to Gary to say, we've got your fly tip, thanks very much. Then what it did is automatically apply a service level agreement policy. So in this case, the general policy for service level agreements around service request was applied, which I think in this example states that we need to respond to a customer within 30 minutes to let them know that we've received the service request and that we're working on it. We then can see that the owner was changed. That was done by the system. That was an automated stamp, time stamped at 10:29. So it was automatically assigned out to a different worker to take responsibility for the service request. And then at the top of the stack, in this example, we've automatically assigned a test. The test here is that we've automatically assigned it out to a commissioned third party. So it's actually been assigned out to a Biffa work queue as the commissioned third party. We're using that example because we've got a number of customers where we've integrated into Biffa systems because they're using Biffa as a separate commissioned third party provider to deliver all of their waste services and elements of environment services and so on. So what you're building up towards, this is a fly tip example, is a full audit trail of everything that's been done to that particular service request, and those things have been done both as an automated rule, and you can do them as a manual process if you want to do that. So if it doesn't fit the automated workflow, you can allow a worker to pick that up, or an operative to pick that up and deal with it in a more kind of human interpretive way. So you've got lots of control over the way that your process is run. So let's jump back to Service Desk and we'll just take another look at some of those aspects. So we were looking at the fly tip, it was submitted at 10:28, the current status is open, it's counting down against that 30-minute service request, so it was submitted, we've got 15 minutes remaining on that service request. It was submitted by Gary Wilcox. I can drop back and see all of Gary's details, I can see the location of it, and I can see that it's been automatically assigned. So I've got lots of opportunity to manage that particular process from within the Service Desk environment. What I can also do by dropping back into the detail of that service request, and I should have called this out on the prior screen, is I've got lots of ability to manage that service request in detail. So if it's been misclassified, I can change the category. If I need to create a document, a PDF document, or a document that I might be able to print to send to the customer, I can do that. If I really need to, I can print the service request details. We obviously don't encourage that in an age of digital transformation. I can send an SMS back to the customer, I can send a templated email back to the customer, I can share it with colleagues internally. If this is a persistent case in the same location of fly tipping and we've got an ongoing investigation to it, I can add it to an existing case and run it through our case management system, or I can update the status. There's lots of things that I can do from this perspective from within Service Desk. It's a fully functioning kind of management interface in that regard. I could also, as an internal operative within Service Desk, I can actually use the same forms that are customer facing to create service requests. So I've got access to all of those same forms internally, be they report it forms, be they apply for it forms, and I can create service requests using effectively the same form set. There is one important point of differentiation on this aspect though, is to say that based on the profile of user, so the form can present in a different way. So you might actually say that if we've got an internal user that's a environmental services user and they're creating a service request, you might ask them different questions to those which you would feel reasonable to ask of a customer doing it as a self-service example. So a form can be designed once, but it can have different elements that present itself to a different user based on the user's profile, which starts to kind of layer in some sophistication to the way that you can work with it. So I hope that gives you a bit of a sense for Service Desk. I'm conscious of time. We've been going 45 minutes. We're at just 15 minutes to go. I think we should be finishing pretty much on time. There's a couple of other final areas that I'd like to share with you, if I may. I'd like to jump across from a service-oriented view of the world to a customer-focused view of the world. And in doing that, what I'm going to do is to actually take you across to our contact center interface. So you're not seeing much on screen at the minute other than the search box. So contact center is our customer relationship management interface. So this is the sort of tool that perhaps a customer service agent that's a front line of telephone contact with your customers might be, or potentially face-to-face if they're in a drop-in centre if you're running those as part of your overall organisation. But if I'm then dealing with a customer, this can be fully integrated into either our own telephony platform or your current telephony platform, so we can accommodate things like screen popping, so as a customer calls in, that pulls up automatically the right customer record. All of those sorts of things are possible. But in this context, I'm actually going to search for a customer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to search for Wilcox, and that brings up all of the Wilcoxes that exist in my database. In this example, it's configured to search against the name, but it also search against the email address, mobile telephone number, postcode, partial address. So you can configure it to search against all of those different aspects. I found Gary Wilcox as second in the list. If I then click on Gary's record, that drops me back into Gary's world. So I can see everything that Gary's got going on with the council as a customer service agent. So I'm immediately furnished with all of the information that I might ever require to make sure that I can assist Gary accordingly. So to give you a quick tour of the screen real estate, we've got the customer record that we're looking at across the top. I've got all of Gary's service requests listed under the service request section, so I can see that he's done a check and pay for his council tax balance today. He's done a book and pay for a bulky item collection. He's done a fly tip, so on and so forth. So I can see all of the service requests that are currently listed in Gary's world that Gary's created or that he's had created on his behalf. I can see all of the interactions that he's had with customer service agents, so all of the different dealings that he's had on the 26th of Jan, the 10th of Jan, the 22nd of December, whatever it might be. I can see any contracts that he's got in place. So I mentioned earlier the contracts management module. I will kind of touch on this very briefly in a moment if we've got time, but the ability to set up, maybe it's an annual garden waste paid contract for collection by the council. And I can see all of the appointments and bookings that he's made, be they for sports facilities or to see a benefits advisor or to book a bulky item collection, whatever it might be. I can see all of those. So I can see everything that Gary's got going on in the central sections of the screen, in the different screen areas. On the right-hand side of the screen, I've got a number of other pieces of information that are available to me. I've got all of the information about Gary as a customer that's open to me here. That could include individual dynamic fields, such as if Gary's got a history of being verbally abusive on the phone, and you've created that as a field in the profile against your customers, so you could have that flagged up, and that may help the customer service agent deal with Gary in a slightly different way, because if it flags that he's read as potentially verbally abusive and a persistent caller into the call centre, that would be useful for the customer to know, and you can offer some advice as part of the process of how CSA would want to deal with that. That isn't the case for Gary, I'm glad to say. He looks like a good upstanding citizen. But what I've also got configured into this contact centre interface is refuse collection data. So I can see if Gary's asking about refuse collection, when's my green garden waste going to be collected, I've got that data plugged into the CRM interface. I can also surface that through the customer portal as well, so we can make that a fully self-service piece. But in this example, I'm showing it to you as a mediated exercise where we're using refuse collection data that's surfaced back up through the CRM, and we can see not only his green garden waste, but we can see his next collection after that. So his black waste, 120 litre, is collected on Monday the 13th of February. And if he wants to ask me about exception days that are coming up over Easter, I can drop into the calendar and I can see all of Gary's collection data over the coming months. So all of that data can be dynamically picked up from your waste management system, if that's a separate system, and we can load that into our system automatically or in a batch way, and that can then be surfaced to customer service agents to help service requests from customers in a mediated fashion, and it can be surfaced back out through the website or the native mobile application, depending on how the customer chooses to access that. So I've got the ability to see all of the transactions and interactions that Gary is having, and I've got a very quick and easy way of casting my eye over information that is pertinent to Gary that might help me deal with him more effectively. If Gary is asking me questions to which I'm not sure of the answer off the top of my head, so maybe he's asking me questions about what he describes as rubbish collection in his street, and he's asking what bin should I have as a resident, I can type that into a knowledge-based search, and I can get context-specific information that's responded back to me as a knowledge-based article. I could copy and paste that into an email back to the customer that might link through to other web content, so on and so forth. So I've got a full knowledge-based capability. Everything that I'm surfacing through the CRM interface here can also be surfaced as a fully self-service capability back through the customer portal. So there's multiple ways that you can deploy both the forms, the knowledge base, things like refuse collection information, so on and so forth. There's an awful lot that I can do through a CRM interface and through the self-service interface. They're completely integrated in that regard. If Gary actually wants me to, he wants to pass on my thanks to say, Gary called to say thank you for whatever he was thanking us for, we might say, well, that's great. So we'll add that activity to the interaction. And once we add that activity, that gets held in this holding area as part of this overall interaction that we're having with Gary. If he then wants to report something to me and create a service request, I can go in and use those forms. So I can use the report it forms, I can use any of the forms that are available to me that are available to Gary as a self-service piece. If I need to send Gary a particular communication, I can click on the action button in the top left-hand corner, and it might be that I want to send Gary an email about something. So I'm going to send that email from customer services at abavus.co.uk. I'm going to select a template. Let's say that Gary was asking about in-year admissions information for schools. I'll select on that option. That automatically populates that template. It picks up Gary's dynamic data, and it gives Gary all of the links and resources that he's likely to need if he's asking about in-year admissions for his children into a school if he's just moved into the area, or whatever it might be. But these are examples that we're throwing up. You can think of lots of parallels for your own organisation, I hope. So there's lots of things I can do from within the customer self-service interface that allow me to, in a semi-automated way, to service Gary quickly and efficiently. And of course, all of those sorts of capabilities can be pointed directly back out at the customer, so that the next time he does it, perhaps he does it for himself. So it's all pointing towards trying to reduce the burden of avoidable contact and enabling customers to self-service as much as possible when it's appropriate and relevant for them to do so. So you can see, as I've been working through those various hypothetical scenarios, the email that I've sent to Gary about in-year admissions into local schools, the incoming call that Gary has made today to say thanks for dealing with the fly tip or whatever the example was, and once I've dealt with that and Gary's happy that we've dealt with all of his current things that he wanted to talk to us about, I just click on Finish Interaction. That will write that record back to the customer record, so whoever picks a call up with Gary next time can see all of that. Gary will be able to see that from his own portal, what he's been doing and dealing with the council. So we've got a full kind of end-to-end customer relationship management capability where we can facilitate full self-service working from Gary's point of view, and we can do that, or a lot of those things as mediated contacts if that's the way that Gary wants to work and that's the way that you want to make them available. So far we've got a few minutes left, and there's the last few bits and pieces that I'd like to share with you. We've been able to look at what it looks like from a self-service perspective, from a browser-based interface, from a native mobile application interface, from a mobile device interface. So we've got lots of options there, and then we've run some kind of back office processes in an automated way to assign things out to different operatives so that they can get dealt with. And we've also been dealing with a hypothetical mediated telephone-based interaction with one of our customers using both service desk and contact center. So we've crammed quite a lot into the last 55 minutes or so. What I'd like to do is just finish up with the last couple of bits and pieces by taking you across, first of all, to the administration screen. So the administration screens are the area within the My Council Services platform where not everyone in your council is going to have access to this. This is certainly a council officer only area, and this is probably for a smaller number of colleagues that would be doing configuration and form design and so on and so forth around the My Council Services platform. So as I mentioned earlier, you can build forms from scratch. I haven't got time this morning to give you an in-depth forms design tutorial or introduction, but there's a full graphical user interface forms designer, and that's a drag and drops capability. But we also offer a forms store. So if, for example, you wanted to borrow with pride from one of your neighbours, and you want to say, well, who else has got a fly tip form that we might want to borrow with pride and obviously improve on? We just search on fly tip, and you could then go in and you could borrow Allerdale Borough Councils or Belfast or Blanagwent or Maidstones or Wiltshires or Doncasters or New Forest or Ronderson on Taff or Kensington and Chelsea or Southend's fly tip form. My guess is there'll all be variations on a classical theme, but the key being that we offer the ability to allow councils, because we only work with local authorities, to share those forms between themselves. We don't charge for them. It's unmediated. You can choose as a council whether you want to make your forms available to other customers, other users of the platform. You don't have to. And then if a customer wants to, then say, well, let's take a look at Allerdale's street scene form for dealing with fly tips. How does that look? We can get a step through that form, so a preview of that form. If we like the look of that, we can select it. and then we just click import, and that then copies that Allerdale form, drops it onto our platform. We can then start to work with it and modify it from our own point of view without interrupting or disrupting what Allerdale is doing, but we're just benefiting from their existing experience of having used the form design. So you don't have to design forms from scratch if you don't want to. And that basic principle of being able to configure and to share best practice is one that permeates the entire platform. We can set up rules from within the administration screen. We've used a couple of example processes this morning where we've used a payment gateway integration. So when we do a payment gateway integration to a customer, we leave that payment gateway integration behind as a plugin, which means that the next time you come to design a payment form, the payment integration options are there as a component that you can just plug into a form. So you can see we've done examples with Capita, with Civica, with WorldPay, with Barclaycard. We're just doing a couple actually of with Go Cardless that are enabling direct debit payments. So the full gamut of payment types and payment setup is possible. And once we've done that, we leave that technical component sitting on the platform for you to call and use in other services that want to use the same capability. So that gives you a bit of a sense, I hope, in terms of the depth and level of configuration. And that's right down to theming and branding and logos and form design and setting up rules and all these sorts of things. And then there are just a last couple of pieces I want to show you as we come up to the hour before we just kind of tidy things up and deal with a few loose ends. I wanted to share with you a little bit of a view into the waste management module. I talked about and shared how we can publish and make available waste collection calendars. So we can do all of that via the waste module. So that's the ability to set up different collection types. There might be domestic collection types, there might be commercial collection types. You can set all of those up and configure all of those in terms of round type that's being collected. We can build a bin collection schedule, we can build in exception days. You can also do things like tracking and analysis and monitoring of refuse management activity. So there's an awful lot of configuration capability around the waste piece. The same is also true of the contracts management module. So we can go in and we can create different configured contract base. So if I want to go and create a contract that is around having a skip on the highway while I do some renovations to my property, I can configure a particular contract process that speaks to that, or to have scaffolding or a temporary license to serve alcohol or whatever it might be, or a taxi application, a minicab application. All of those things can be configured using the contracts module. So a combination of administration and the individual line of business modules allows you as the council to take full control over the range of digital processes that you want to deploy. The very final piece is just to touch on some of the reporting capability. So if I just jump across to the dashboard interface here, I've got the ability to look at exactly what's going on through the platform at any given point in time in terms of the type and range of service requests. So I'm looking at specific service requests. I can see which customers are active here, so who's doing what, who our most active customers might be. I can see individual statistics, so how customers are interacting with us either via devices or browsers, as a member of the public or as mediated contact via the contact center. So I've got really detailed usage stats, and I can build up views of that both at a service request level, at a customer level, at a task and workforce level, and there's lots of different reporting functions across the platform that are in real time based on live data. So what I'm going to do just to finish up, we've got a minute left until we're on the air. I'm just going to jump back across to the slides. I'll make those full screen again. I hope that's been a useful introduction to some of the My Council Services capabilities from a customer self-service perspective. Just a few final words from me to help finish off the session. I've shown you quite a lot this morning. So from a customer self-service perspective, the portal, the app, the ability to do all sorts of different types of processes, and then we've spent some time managing those in the back office, and we've touched on how you can configure and set those up and govern those. That might look like quite a lot to bite off in one go. The message really, I suppose, is that MCS, My Council Services, can be implemented incrementally. So we can set up, a small number of services. You can do that. You can start in quite a small way and develop over time, and that's what lots of our customers have done. And one of the things that we've found to be quite successful for our clients is to start with some smaller tactical wins, maybe place a smaller bet on the technology initially, demonstrate the value, and then kind of build out to a more strategic vision over time, having done that due diligence for strategic capability that covers all of your requirements initially. So you can start incrementally and build up over time. I've mentioned before that My Council Services is very much open in terms of its stance technologically, so that means that we can be integrated quickly and easily with other third-party applications, and I've given you some examples of that around payment integration and integrations into other third-party systems as we've talked through this morning. And the final point I would say, I suppose, as a governor to all of this, is just to say that technology is only part of the solution. There needs to be a coherent project plan around the implementation of any new technologically enabled capability. You need to make sure that people are trained and understand what the new technological solutions can do. So there are organisational aspects that need to be brought along with any transformation technology that you might be using, like My Council Services. We'd also say that actually the introduction of transformative platforms like My Council Services give you a ripe opportunity to both redesign and simplify processes. So and also to make those processes digital and automated from end to end. We don't necessarily recommend that you just go ahead and roll over existing offline processes into an online form. That may not be the best way to do that. And finally, just to remind you that I hope you found today's session useful. The slides will be available for download. We will make a recording of today's session available if you can tolerate listening to me in record mode again. But I hope it's been a useful session, and of course feel free to contact us with any questions, or if you'd like any further discussion or detail, or if you'd like to run this for any colleagues. Our phone number is on screen, our general email address is on screen, and our Twitter handle is on screen. So it just remains for me to say thank you very much and to wish you a pleasant and productive remainder of your Thursday. Thanks folks, bye bye now.